laws off our syllabus. Background information. The template that we developed was developed during the summer of 2021 by Valerie, myself, and our colleague Emily Ho as part of the African American Policy Forum's higher ed group. We sort of rolled it out at the National Teach-In on October 14th. You can find the template that we've been sending out and other documents here, and there'll be other links throughout the presentation for the template. So I'm not going to read all the institutions that have passed it, but over 15 have, and many more I know are in discussions and are on agendas. So one thing I do want to say is that we started off by reaching out to public flagships because we figured or hoped that if public flagships passed it, other colleges and universities in that state might consider doing the same. And that's been true. So for example, Texas, University of Texas at Austin passed it on, here, let me move my window a little aside from that. Texas passed it on Monday. And according to the chair of the Academic Freedom Committee there, she's already heard from people at Texas A&M and other schools who are interested in doing the same. Let me go back to that. Okay, so associations can pass it. So the American Studies Association, others have, California Faculty Association can pass this resolution. And here's a link to the American Studies Association one. Chapters can pass it. I think there are probably more chapters that already have that I'm just not aware of, but I know that Ball State and Purdue have passed it. And we really encourage that if a chapter, this webinar is hosted through AAUP, so hopefully we have people from AAUP chapters here. If you pass it as a chapter, we really hope that you'll take the next step and also propose it to your faculty senate or university assembly, whatever it's called on your campus, and try to get it passed there as well. I know that Ball State is doing that, and it's already passed through, they've got 2 levels. It's already passed through their faculty senate, and now it's in the hands of the University Council, and hopefully it will be passed. National press, the Inside Higher Ed covered it in December. And after UT passed it on Monday, Inside Higher Ed gave one of its quick takes. And a few of us I know have been interviewed by the Washington Post now. So UT passing it, so one of the biggest, baddest, reddest states has prompted some attention. So look out for more national attention, in particular, an article from the Washington Post that I think is going to be out soon. Okay, if you're looking for information on these bills, some of which are already laws and some of which are still pending, and how they impact higher education, there may be something, there are definitely other things out there, but to my mind, the Penn report that came out on February 1st is the best. Now, I think a lot of people, we started reaching out to people in September, and I think a lot of people were under the wrong impression that these bills and laws affect only K through 12. That was never true, but now there are even more that directly affect higher ed. The Penn report also has attached a spreadsheet where they itemize by state the bills that are pending or passed. So why use shared governance to do this? Shared governance, according to the AAUP, refers to the responsibilities shared among the different components of the institution. So what are the components for faculty? What are their primary responsibilities? We have primary responsibility for fundamental areas like curriculum, subject matter and methods of instruction, research, faculty status, and those aspects of student life related to the educational process. So the reason why Faculty Senate and shared governance is the place to go after these bills is precisely because these bills go after us and our prerogative, a long established precedent that we have prerogative over curriculum and teaching. And why? Why has that been a long established precedent that we're authoritative in these areas? Faculty are distinctly qualified to exercise decision-making authority in the areas of their expertise. Faculty's judgment is central to educational policy. Scholars in a field or activity have the, I can't even see my own slides there too, have the chief competence for judging the work of their colleagues. So, and we exercise our shared governance, of course, at faculty senates or councils. And that's where we have wider discussions about these things and we come to some kind of consensus. So one thing I want to mention, I know that Val is going to talk about the strange bedfellows that this resolution can create. So from conservative, centrist liberals to leftists coming together around the protection of academic freedom. But one thing that I want to mention before I hand it over to Val is some of the things I'm hearing from people in red states. So at UT Austin, for example, this Monday, a woman who does climate research said, hey, look, it's critical race theory today. It'll be climate research or evolution tomorrow. And I've heard that a lot from people, that when the discussion starts to happen, people who say, faculty, you know, we're usually very immersed in our own research and teaching, and we may not be thinking, oh, we have a dog in this fight. Faculty come to realize through these discussions that, oh, we do, we all have a dog in this fight. So what are some of the benefits of using shared governance? And these are things that if you're trying to pursue this on your own campuses, you can remind people of these benefits. First of all, like I said, faculty can often get immersed in our own corners, and some of us are only dimly aware of what's going on. The resolutions, the conversations around the resolution makes people aware. It helps create a united faculty voice denouncing, and a united faculty voice is exactly what we need right now. The united faculty voice can impact legislatures' calculations. I have heard from people in Ohio, Colorado, Alabama, who say that by passing this resolution, they actually affected the way a bill was written. And in some cases, they really ramped up administrators' lobbying efforts to try to get these bills shot down. So it affects the legislatures. It puts administrators on notice that, hey, if what these bills and laws do, I should say what these bills have passed and what these laws do is deputize students and different conservative organizations and different conservative activists to look for people who are violating these laws and then bring action against them. These resolutions put administrators on notice that if that happens, whether you're in a red state or blue state, whether you're in a state that's passed the bill or not, when campus reform, when a student tries, records someone on campus and puts it on campus reform, and even these bills or laws are pointed to, even if it's not in that particular state, it puts administrators on notice that, hey, we've said that you need to protect and stand firm on our colleagues' academic freedom. And it helps to develop a community that sees itself as part of this issue and doesn't leave individuals who get targeted flailing by themselves, which if you've ever been targeted, you know how lonely that can be. They also, and I think this is really important and largely underlooked, these resolutions may well become documents in court cases because court cases are inevitably going to follow these laws. So I want to mention just this is one of the reasons why the national attention is finally being brought to this campaign for Senate resolutions. The Lieutenant Governor, when Texas passed it on Monday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick tweeted this: "I will not stand by and let loony Marxist UT professors," mind you, of course, we're talking about climate researchers. We're talking about, there was the woman who's the chair of the Academic Freedom Committee who got it endorsed by a number of standing Senate committees before she brought it to the floor, does neuroscience, right? But I will not stand by and let loony Marxist UT professors, and then he really steps in it. He says, we banned it in K through 12, we'll ban it in higher ed, and that's why we created the Liberty Institute. So we've got violation of academic freedom upon violation of academic freedom. So in this actually has reignited the conversation about the Liberty Institute that's been, strong at UT and been in faculty senate, because a lot of faculty wonder if this was imposed on them. So one of the reasons why I want to mention this is because if you're in a southern state and you're getting resistance, and I do hear this from people, you're getting resistance on pursuing a resolution, or if you start to pursue it and you get this kind of resistance of why pick a fight? Why, if we're not, we're being sort of told, reassured by our administrators that everything, just don't make a fuss and draw attention. And so someone might look at this and say, okay, see, the lieutenant governor now wants to punish UT. The reality is this fight is already happening. We're already in it. And the idea that staying quiet will protect us is just very naive, in my opinion. All right, so I should move on to the next. Oh, okay, so I'm going to talk a little, I'm just going to say a few words because I think probably everyone here is already familiar with a lot of this. about academic freedom. And then when I hand it over to Val, she's going to distinguish academic freedom from free speech. And I think that distinction does become important in these campaigns and various conversations around these campaigns. So of course, academic freedom is the freedom to teach, research, it protects intramural speech and extramural speech. Teach, research, investigate, and discuss issues in our respective academic fields and disciplines. Teach and publish without interference from political bodies and figures, including governing boards and donors. Speaking freely when participating in institutional and shared governance. Okay, so that covers my half of the slides. I'm going to hand it over to Val now and stop sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so very insightful and so very important. Needless to say, yes, the fight has begun. So, you know, staying quiet or under the radar, it's actually a little late. It's a little late for that. I'm going to talk about the difference, as Jennifer noted, the difference between free speech and academic freedom, because as noted, it is very important in this context. You know, when you think about free speech and of course academic freedom, both are very important to an academic environment. But as we focus specifically on what is being taught in the classroom, then free speech becomes important, because the question becomes, I mean, are legislators, you know, are they given some sort of free speech right to trample on our syllabi or what is taught in the classroom or the curriculum? Or is there an important distinction that needs to be preserved in the classroom? So I'm just going to run through some distinctions between free speech and academic freedom. Number one, with free speech, you know, there's equal status in the field of ideas. Okay, you can think what you want to think. Hey, you can think that, you know, life began in North America, you know, and so it's sort of like a viewpoint neutrality. But with academic freedom, you know, there is an inequality of status, you know, just not some Joe Blow legislator can decide. There's an inequality of status between ideas based on what? Disciplinary standards and peer review, right? And those disciplinary standards and peer review certainly protect and defend our pursuit of knowledge for the common good. Secondly, speech does not manifest any sense of competence with regard to free speech. You know, as long as it doesn't incite violence or fall under some sort of category of constitutionally unprotected speech, hey, let her rip, right? But with academic freedom, and you're talking about the classroom, you know, in terms of what gets on the curriculum, what gets on the syllabus, it's about speech manifesting disciplinary competence. So to that degree, disciplinary incompetence is not protected. It has to have some sort of empirical validity, right? Finally, free speech rights are focused on the individual. I get to say whatever I want to say. Academic freedom, however, is pegged and regulated by the collective peers within your particular discipline. And again, that discipline suggests some degree of competence. So no, we do not want partisan politicians determining what can be taught in the classroom. And you ask yourself, with regards to the primary responsibility that faculty have in the area of curriculum, when you also couple that with our expertise, then no, legislators are not qualified, right? And so let me shift to 5 steps to passing the resolution. Number 1, you can find the resolution template here. And as Gwen noted, we are sharing our slides. They'll be on the AAUP website, and I think that there were some links also that were shared in the chat. But you know, down here at the bottom, resolution template for university Senate meetings, you'll find the template there. To the right here, Senate resolution template examples, open letter to defend academic freedom. If you want to send out something to people about this at your institution, go ahead and cut and paste from the open letter to defend academic freedom. And finally, you know, there's a button there for you to share your campus Senate resolution status. The second step is to determine your institution's process to propose a motion and then establish some sort of timeline. I think in most institutions, it's basically the same. In my institution, you have to get a member of faculty council or one of the standing committees to, you know, initiate a motion. But, you know, that does not stop you from certainly mobilizing a group of, you know, sponsors, co-sponsors, and then allies, right? Scan the list of your faculty senate and find out, you know, I mean, you know, your leaders, your faculty governance leaders, you know who is more likely to be sympathetic to this issue. If you have a faculty unit, especially AAUP chapter, recruit their support. Reach out to departments that would be most impacted, like English, Black Studies, History, women and Gender Studies. So in other words, you're mobilizing support, right? Here is a copy. This is like a copy of the template. But one great thing that Jennifer and I and Emily, we attempted to do, we wanted to create a template that you could adapt to your own situation. As I say here, in many instances, your institution already has some values that it has committed to in either its mission statement or in communications to the larger community. For example, after the murder of George Floyd, when in over 60 countries across the world, there were protests, you know, this is on all 7 continents, you know, administrators, they kind of, you know, made real great proclamations about the need to end racial discrimination and systemic bias and to focus on inclusion, et cetera. So in many instances, those commitments are already there. And so you just kind of plop them into the motion. The motion that passed at DePaul University, I'm proud to say, was the first one, and we passed that in September 21st. And as Jennifer alluded to, passing this motion for us was like strange bedfellows. You know, there were some people who were like, you know, CRT, I don't quite understand it, or I don't quite agree with it, or whatever. But the bottom line is, you know, if it's CRT today, it's something else in the future. And again, we are talking about the very character of our nation. Are we the type of nation that narrows the confines of what is taught? And is that led by that effort, or that campaign, if you will, is that effort led by people who are literally incompetent to judge what should and should not be taught? So this is a copy of the DePaul resolution. As you can see here, whereas DePaul has a stated commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, you know, whereas DePaul in its newly revised mission statement affirms that, you know, we blah, 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 blah. I mean, the point is, we are saying to the administration, okay, you've made these commitments. Now it's time for you to sort of pony up. This is the a copy of a screenshot of the Portland State University Faculty Senate resolution. Now, I can say that for Jennifer and I both, passing these resolutions were Not as difficult as they have been at other institutions, right? And so that is why it is so important for you to gather or mobilize supporters. For the one at DePaul, I had never, ever, and I've been in faculty governance for a long time, I had never, ever seen that many co-sponsors. Again, it was really strange bedfellows. People who never agree with me and who I never agree with were writing me saying, yeah, Val, I'll co-sponsor it. So, I mean, you know, again, it is about protecting academic freedom, defending the pursuit of education, wherever that pursuit takes us. And it's about, you know, that association between education and democracy. Finally, get it on the agenda for discussion and then bring it to a vote. I did not have, I didn't bring it for a discussion and then for a vote, but I think as we've thought about this, sometimes it's better to bring it for a discussion so you could duke it out, right? And you could, you know, sometimes you're going to have to tweak it to accommodate certain interests. But the point is, we must protect academic freedom. You know, so you got to avoid those squabbles between, well, I don't want to protect academic freedom if it preserves CRT. We have to get beyond that. And we have to see ourselves as in a literal battle. As I said in my opening remarks, you know, we conceded ground 20 something years ago. And that's why we have, you know, we see this proliferation of contingent faculty who are literally fearful to fight for academic freedom. So this is our last Waterloo or whatever. Think of this as our last stand to ensure that education as we know it is preserved. So 2 Senate meetings, identify supporters, and then last but not least, please let us know what you're doing and how we can help. We've had several conversations, Zoom conversations with colleagues around the country who needed just a little help. And so shoot us an email. Our emails are on the slides, our emails are in the chats, and just let us know, you know, how this is going and push that link to the reporting mechanism that we have set up on the AAPF site to just let us know so that we can be better able to discuss this with the media. You know, the other side, so to speak, they have their media game on. Every time you turn on the television, they're on TV. You know, they're talking about, yeah, we passed another one, right? But we don't have that type of pull. And so we've got to keep one another abreast of what it is we're doing, how we're passing it, so we can up our media game. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Gwen.
To unmute myself. I've been kind of keeping an eye on the questions. So Val and Jennifer, I will ask you read some of the questions out of the chat. So the first one is, this person's faculty senate has just passed a resolution. What can faculty and AAUP chapters do to enforce this to hold the administration accountable if need be?
So,
okay, go ahead.
Which institution? We should give a shout out.
Penn State.
Thank you, Penn State. Awesome. And so the question is, and I think we have managed to leave plenty of time. So Val, please feel free to add. The question about how to hold the administrators accountable. So I assume that the administrator, because the template calls on administrators to affirm their support of the resolution and their support of academic freedom. And I know, as Val mentioned, that we didn't actually, Val was a little surprised at how easy at DePaul. I wasn't particularly surprised at how easy at Portland State. And in fact, actually, when we made the slides, we were thinking 2 meetings, but in a number of places, it's passed really quickly in 1 meeting. That was the case for Portland State. And instantly, our president and provost said, we very much affirm this. We want to support these kinds of efforts. So if you don't get, but there's no call for them to publicly state that. So I'm not sure what the Penn State administration response was to it. But I think it's going to happen when people start showing up in campus reform. You want your Senate leader to be, the administrators are going to need to show support for that person. It's also going to be important to pressure administrators to connect with administrators across the country. This is a faculty resolution. No reason why presidents and provosts can't, as across the country, pass their own resolutions or do an administrator's resolution that they get as many signers as possible. They need to be doing this kind of work as well. So you need somebody who faculty kind of trust, like maybe the faculty senate president, to be regularly asking those questions of what are you doing for this to protect academic freedom, not just here, but everywhere, and getting them to report in. Val, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question because it acknowledges that this is just getting it passed is just possibly just the first step, right? Because we know that any sort of statements or resolutions or motions, they are paper tigers, right? But the beauty of a resolution is that you can point to it and say, you all said, right? And so that is how resolutions are implemented in their ability to, it's like, hey, we have already definitely confirmed that this is a value that we uphold. And in an interesting way, it gives our administrators leverage. Because as I was saying in the introduction, our administrators are under great pressure. A lot of, administrators, they just want to keep their job, and they know how to keep their job is by satisfying the state legislature, right? And so that pressure can be, placed onto us. If they're under pressure, we're under pressure, but it gives them leverage to be able to say, nah, 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 nah. No, at ABC University, we have done this, and this is a commitment that we stand by.
Thank you. The next question also was, we've received similar things in the chat, which is about how AAUP chapters who've already passed a resolution, how else can they, what other actions can they take to further the cause? And I'll let you answer, but I also just wanted to mention that the AAUP government relations staff is working with chapters on fighting this kind of legislation in state halls and through the media. So we'll send a link after in the follow-up information with information about that on our webpage. But Jennifer or Val, did you have anything to add about that?
I would just add that, again, like I said in the presentation, if you pass it as a chapter, be sure to also bring it to the faculty senate and faculty council so that both groups have passed it. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I would also say something about, just sort of ensuring that you have a degree of competence. I think that to discuss these issues, because all of a sudden, these issues are on Dr. Phil. They have been removed from some sort of esoteric discussion to, you might have this conversation with your uncle across the dinner table. What the hell is this CRT stuff and why is this important? Just to be, be able to articulate why this is very important, and connecting it not only to academic freedom that affects us in the academy, right, but to people as citizens. I think that it's very important to be able to articulate that.
Thank you. Here's another question that we've gotten a lot, which is, a lot of my colleagues keep saying this doesn't affect us because it's mainly K-12. Any suggestions for encouraging faculty to take a stand instead of waiting until they come for us?
Well, I can definitely tell you that I have been in communication with people in states where the person on the campus wants to has already adapted in some cases, wants to pass this resolution, but gets resistance like this. And then I've heard from a couple of people recently that all of a sudden they're realizing that that was a mistake, that either it did actually already affect them, these pending bills or laws, or that new ones are popping up that do, and that they should get active on the resolution. The other thing I just want to stress is that, even in blue states where people feel very insulated, in some cases feel very insulated from this, these resolutions, the more places that pass them, So even if you're not facing anything direct in your state, first of all, you might, as you know, November 2022 starts to ramp up. So be ahead of the game. Secondly, you're showing solidarity with K through 12. So for example, the Ohio State resolution, we have in the documents that we've given links to, the list of places that have passed it, in many cases have links that where you can actually look at the resolution that passed, right? Because as Val showed you, the template itself makes room for people to adapt it. And actually people, you know, some people like University of Alabama went off the template altogether and changed the way they did it. So you can look at a number of different resolutions. If you're if you want to say, hey, right now it doesn't affect us, it only affects K through 12, but hey, we need to stand with K through 12. Ohio State's resolution is really good on that. The other thing I would mention is that if you have a college of education or an education department, it does already affect you if it affects K through 12. This is something that my education colleagues have been very clear on. It affects teacher preparation. It affects what their graduate students can do in the K through 12 classroom. It is profoundly affecting any education instructor at the higher ed level because they're in direct contact with K through 12.
And also, when you think about it, it has an impact on the students we teach. I remember after No Child Left Behind, you know, and this sort of decapitation of, you know, the curriculum in terms of teaching to the test, we got a whole different type of student in our classrooms, right? And so just imagine our student, you know, they have this narrow instruction at the K through 12 level, and then we're expected to do a yeoman's task starting from point 1. Also, you know, I like Jennifer said, I mean, you don't want to wait for, you know, to the point where they're actually coming for you, because it's very difficult to mobilize support while you've got your head in the lion's mouth, right? It's sort of like being prepared. You know, a good offense is always better than a defense. So, you know, they are coming for you. You know, I don't think that they're just planning to just settle for a few states. You know, they are coming for you. So it's better to get the show on the road, so to speak.
Another question is, what can private, you know, faculty at private institutions do about this, and how might it affect them?
Well, DePaul University is a private institution, and hey, how goes public education, so goes private education. When I was talking about, you know, the fight that we conceded over 25, 28 years ago with regards to contingent faculty and just allowing this sort of explosion of it, you know, it's like, you know, of course, at first, it was like even economic downturns, private education wasn't as affected as much because we were flush, et cetera. But then it came to us as well. So I don't think that we should make this private public distinction. And of course, private institutions get state funding as well. They are faced with certain funding imperatives as well.
Let's see. Someone asks if you know of any student governments that are considering similar resolutions.
That's not been an angle that I have put much work into, but I do know that Idaho has a very active student president who at one point was trying to pass the resolution. I'm not sure what the status is. But that, I mean, the earlier question about if you've already passed it, what can you do? I think, or because Penn State did pass it as a Senate, not just as a chapter. What can you do now? Talk to the students, get the student government to pass the resolution, you know, put pressure, as I said before, on your administrators to create resolutions at that level. And then of course, reach out to, we should be involving students, and but I don't myself know of any except for in Idaho. One thing that I do want to say, and it may well come up in another question, but The people in the South, definitely in my conversations across the country, you know, there are places like Wisconsin that are really seeing these bills are coming, are very strong, very heavy-handed in Wisconsin. But Madison passed the resolution, but the faculty there seem less intimidated. In the South, there really is a lot of fear of retaliation. There is a lot of sense of conflict around these kinds of things. To the extent that you can help us support schools in the South to pass resolutions, to the extent that you can reach out to them and offer support, that would be great. Because we can't just be isolated institutions in this fight. This is a fight for democracy and academic freedom.
Thank you. Someone asked if there's pros or cons as to which body puts forward the resolution first, if there's a university senate and AAUP chapter, and also if the chapter is a union.
No, I mean, the bottom line is to work in concert with one another. You know, the more entities on campus that you have supporting this, the better. So on our campus, you know, I had reached out to the AAUP chapter, and then they were in support of passing it on faculty council. Several of the members of the AAUP chapter are also on faculty council. So it was just a dynamic duel, but it has to be a dynamic duel. I mean, you know, we can't operate in our silos on collective problems.
Someone else asked if you have suggestions on how to pitch a resolution or something about the preservation of academic freedom in general if one is in an institution where faculty are highly ideological mixed and there's a substantial contingent who are likely aligned with this anti-CRT legislation.
Well, first of all, I would say reach out to us, because I'm happy to put you in touch with people at Alabama who passed it and had to deal with some difficulties there. And so the more you learn from people who are in situations like yours who've passed it, the better sort of empowered you're going to be. So that's one thing. Let us know that you want to do this and ask, and we'll try to support you as much as possible. One thing also to be aware of, this isn't true everywhere. It may not be true where the person who asked the question is, but there also are really loud, you know, Val was mentioning earlier about how the other side has a really strong press game and our side doesn't, which is why we need to have solidarity among everyone who's trying to, you know, protect academic freedom. And there is a growing contingent of people who academics, faculty members, who believe that institutions have been captured, right, by liberal ideology, and that we need the government to step in and control higher ed. And those people, they may actually be really minorities, but they get a lot of attention. So for example, there's a guy, a finance professor, and also the sheer lack of humility among a few of these people where they want to say that they know what critical race theory is, and it becomes quickly apparent that they've never read anybody but Chris Ruffo. That's the only person they've read is for their definition of critical race theory. But so you have someone who he's the one person. I attended the Senate on Monday. The one person who spoke against the bill. 5 people ended up voting against it, 45 for it. He's one person who spoke against it, but he edited the recording and tweeted himself speaking against it. And Fox News picked it up. And they claimed it had gone viral. It hadn't, but now of course it will, be precisely because Fox News picked it up. So to also remind yourself of, even if it's a loud contingent, they may well still be a minority and they may get more press attention and it may start to feel really overwhelming, but they may still be a minority. I don't know your institution, the person who asked the question, and so they may not be a minority, but often that's the case. Yeah,
I think the important thing to think about is to have the debate. Even if it is a contentious debate, this is something that you at your institution are going to have to reckon with. Are we in support of academic freedom or not? Is it just certain people at the institution have academic freedom and others do not? You know, so I think it's an argument that those who would be opposed to this cannot win. Because you cannot argue for academic freedom for yourself and not others. That is just the simple fact of it all. I think that we all, ideas are contestable, and we're constantly, changing, expanding knowledge, right? One ideal leads to a refutation of that, and then on and on and on, and we're building knowledge. So to act as if we have some sort of, privilege or a greater understanding than our colleagues, that would be a fight that would be very, very difficult to defend. So have the debate and, answer, at the end of the day, answer the question, is academic freedom important at this university?
Sort of building on that, somebody asked about accountability mechanisms. So beyond the performative speech of the administration saying that they believe in academic freedom, are there specific administrative protections that faculty senates should seek or faculty should seek for faculty who are perceived to run afoul of this legislation or who end up with their words and identity twisted in right-wing outlets and experience harassment? So are there protective mechanisms that faculty should explicitly ask for from the administration?
Well, as a person who's on the professor watch list, I can say that, that's a question that I have pondered quite a bit because, as a person who's run afoul of, some of these sort of right-wing groups, they wrote a Breitbart hit piece on me. And in the final analysis, my institution was very sympathetic, but I mean, what can you do really, except, continue the discussion about how, even free speech has been contracted. I always find it interesting that the very people who are crying for free speech are the very ones who try to contract free speech when it's something that they don't agree with or don't want to hear. So I just think, again, just keeping the debate alive. I can't imagine, just like my institution, when I was being threatened, they gave me a panic button to have on my desk, so I really don't know what they can do except be with you at all moments, at all times. It's something that you don't want to, run amok of, it's painful, but, at least sensitize your institution in advance that what sort of threat we're under in our job as educators.
Yeah, and that was the point I made earlier about the resolution itself, whether we all know, well, maybe because I come out of English literature, I know that words have, words matter and they're not simply performative, but in performing, they help create certain kinds of outcomes. And so by passing the resolution, you are sensitizing each other to help protect and at least emotionally support people who get attacked. So, and I want to underscore Val's point about the hypocrisy of going from the same politician who tried to pass the legislation to protect conservative speech and is claiming free speech is now the person putting up bills to ban speech. And that's a complex history that comes from a libertarian attempt to conflate academic freedom and free speech, create a national idea in the public that free speech is under attack, and that's been a well-funded campaign. I would recommend Isaac Kamola and Ralph Wilson's book, Free Speech and Coke Money, to really get a sense. I had a vague sense of that. They really walk you through all of the ways in which certain kinds of incidents get created through Coke money. They get funded to be on campuses, and then the very journalists writing about them get funding from Koch Foundation. But the reason why I mentioned them in particular too is that they've started a group called First Responders, and they actually, Isaac Kamola and Ralph Wilson, they have a group that scans campus reform, Fox News, that kind of thing, and looks for attacks and then reaches out to people who have been attacked to show support. As far as holding your own administrations accountable when you get attacked, I have been by someone who the Orwellian nature of this can sometimes boggle the mind. But by one of the people who makes this case that destroyed it, the Jordan Peterson case, destroy institutions, we have to start over, or governments need to intervene because things are out of control, which again is the narrative that the libertarians have helped to create. I've been called Madam Mao by this person who wants the state to take over. And I've also gotten a lot of hate mail. And my union chapter, I don't know how strong your union chapter is, but my union chapter has been very active in forcing administrators to document these things, to do evaluations of the level of threat. It always ultimately is kind of disappointing, as Val said, because it's short of coming with you everywhere, what they can't do a lot. But we've been arguing that at the very least, they need to keep an accounting of this. They need to use their IT people, because a lot of these kinds of threats or hate mail comes through proton mail or things that are hard to trace. And so start getting their IT people on this to trace these threats back to their sources. So I really, this seems related to the resolution, because the resolution is going to prompt some of these attacks, the people who are putting them forward. But you really need a union chapter or a group that's developing a series of protocols about how to respond when people get threats, and making administrators house those protocols.
Thanks, and I'll add that we're going to host an AUP webinar with faculty first responders, the group you just mentioned that works on responding to harassment in April. We are running pretty short on time, but we have time for one or two more questions. One, somebody's asking, somebody at SUNY says that their faculty senate passed a resolution. They're wondering if AAUP would be open to providing a clearinghouse of these. And I think that's something that the African American Policy Forum does. Is that right, Jennifer? You have a sort of a list of who has passed these resolutions?
Yeah, I would love AAUP also too, because African American Policy Forum actually does so many things. It does say her name. It's not a higher ed organization. So they do, but there's a delay. And when I say, hey, this, and SUNY person, please email me or Val and let us know where you passed it. Because I think there are resolutions being passed that we don't actually know about. But AAUPF doesn't have as many resources, I think, than AAUP. So if AAUP could also have a clearinghouse, that would be really helpful.
That would be definitely helpful, for AAUP. And it seems like it would be a logical place, so if AAUP could link the template and link everything and be that sort of clearinghouse, that would be perfect. As Jennifer noted, nonprofit organizations just don't have that Koch brothers, power and resources.
Let's see. Another few quick ones. Somebody's asking, what should the role of senior admins, trustees, and the president be in this? Their administration doesn't have much appetite for taking a public stance. They're living in a very conservative state. What should the role be of senior admins, trustees, and the president?
Silence kills. And so I just don't think that we have the liberty in this battle to allow people to be silent, because once, if they're silent, then that means that they are more subject to be pressured by state legislators or board of trustees. I think that in evaluating our administrators and even hiring administrators, we have to begin to think about hiring people who have a demonstrated commitment to academic freedom, right? So we have to put administrators on notice that this is an expectation, and this is not something that, we're willing to concede. So if you're hiring a president like DePaul University, hey, what is your demonstrated commitment? Demonstrated being the operative term. So we have to acclimate our administrators to understanding that this is an expectation that we are not willing to concede.
Okay, we have about a minute and a half. Did either one of you have any kind of final remarks?
I would just say that question of how do we hold administrators and board of trustees accountable, That question is second to first passing it as faculty, first creating a unified voice as faculty and a stand, drawing that line in the sand, as Val said earlier. Do that first, then you can start asking questions. That's my sense of the order of how things you'd want to go. We are directly responsible for curriculum and for faculty, what happens in shared governance and faculty senate. We can't control what administrations are going to do. But we can set a standard for them and set expectations for them. And that's precisely what the resolution does. So I would say do that first, help other schools do that in your vicinity, help colleagues at other, you have friends from graduate school at other campuses, tell them to do it. So start at the horizontal level with faculty senates across the country. And then we can develop some ways to make sure that our resolutions get respected. And again, I just want to stress that I think they will become important documents in the court cases that will follow these bills and laws.
Yeah, and I would add that think of it like this. We're not asking for anything that we haven't already been granted. We have academic freedom until it is being encroached upon. So it's not like we're asking, going to, administrators, can we please have something? We already have primary responsibility over curriculum. We already have a professed value for academic freedom. So we're not asking for anything, we're defending something, right? So I think, we can't look at it like, oh, wow, they're gonna say no. They can't say no because this is a time-honored right.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you so much, Val and Jennifer from the African American Policy Forum, for agreeing to do this webinar and giving us all this great info. We will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording and a lot of other resources. And I dropped a link in the chat to just a webinar evaluation. If folks wouldn't mind taking that, it's very quick and just giving us a little bit of feedback. That would be great too.
Thanks so much to everyone who came, and please don't hesitate to email myself or Val. This very much is a kind of ground roots kind of campaign, so we need to hear from you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a wrap.